So this video is all about low, compact, evergreen plants. Welcome to HortTube. My name is Jim Putnam. In this video, I'm going to be talking about some compact evergreen plants, little low growing plants that will work great on a foundation, just plants that you can kind of put in the ground and not really have to think about a whole lot once you get them established. And I'm going to jump right in and talk about this Dragon Prince Cryptomeria. This one is similar to one called Globosa nana. Both of these are good choices for a low growing conifer. They're both soft to the touch. Cryptomeria is just a Japanese cedar. They're Japanese cedars that get 50, 80 feet tall, and then ones that are kind of in between that. And then you got these little true dwarfs, and there's a lot of them, but I'm really drawn to Dragon Prince and Globosa nana. They're perfect little round domes that you don't really have to do anything to. If they're, you know, they'll slowly but surely reach that 4 or 5 foot range over a long period of time, but they can be controlled down in the 2.5 foot range, slightly wider than tall. So this is Radiance Abelia. This is one of the most compact, low growing, low maintenance Abelia on the market. Actually, it's probably my number one. Miss Lemon would be my number two. And the main thing is these hold their color really, really well through the winter. So what you're seeing here in this kind of yellowish variegation, this will remain like this throughout the winter. It has this red stem underneath it too, which is also interesting. These bloom literally all summer. Once they get started, they get started blooming a little later than, you know, after your spring flowering shrubs typically. So toward the beginning of June, and then they'll literally bloom until you get a frost in the fall. Pollinators absolutely love them. Again, they look like this year round. One of my all-time favorite low growing evergreen shrubs are Indian hawthorns, but we've seen over the last 2 decades or so a lot of leaf spot disease issues in a lot of our low growing compact Indian hawthorns. But this variety right here is called Clean Sweep Snowbank. It's a white flowering dwarf that has none of the, it's resistant to the leaf spot. And so there's no spotting whatsoever on this one. You can see this one's been in the ground for about a year. I've got some annuals crowding it and a couple things crowding it that need to be cut back. But look how great of a little low doming plant this is. It blooms white in the spring, and then it just becomes this little low doming plant with perfect dark green shiny foliage, and you know the new growth on it has a slightly lighter color, so it's, you know, has a bit of that two-tone in it, but just a great indestructible kind of low doming evergreen plant. Of course, you can't have a video about compact evergreen shrubs without talking about boxwoods, and there's lots of different varieties of boxwoods. Just, you know, make sure the one you're picking, if you're going for a low growing one, you know, fits that category, because there are boxwoods that are upright and fastigiate. You know, see how this one's kind of going upright, and then there are ones that are more doming shaped. Typically you can tell in the container how it's going to grow in the landscape, but of course, you know, boxwoods can be kept any size, or any size you want to keep them, from, you know, 1.5 foot tall to, you know, 5 feet in height. I have a couple Leucothoe in the landscape that fit the kind of low doming shape. There are Leucothoe that get really, really big. This is Bohemian Beauty, and it is a variegated one, and the variegation starts out with light green leaves with variegation in them, and then they get darker over time, and it creates this really amazing look to this plant where it's doing all kinds of things at once. A bit showy. I'm shooting this at the end of summer. It's definitely a bit showier in the spring, and the early summer it has more of the new growth on it than it does currently. It does flower. Kind of insignificant flowers. Then we have one out front called Burning Love, also is a low compact grower. And when it is putting on new growth in the spring, the new growth is bright red. And then in the wintertime, it turns this really beautiful purple color. So 2 great low growing compact Leucothoes. These are going to be for part shade. Everything I've talked about thus far had been full sun, but definitely Leucothoes are going to be happiest in part shade. So one of the best, most industrial, compact, low-growing plants is Carissa holly. It does have one problem, that over time it can revert back to the old variety, which was called rotundifolium, which had more points on the leaf. The normal leaf on Carissa holly has just a single point on the end. I had these on my foundation for 23 years at the old house. At around 15 years, that rotundifolium started to show back up in it. It was reverting back to what it originally was, because Carissa holly is just a sport of rotundifolium. Other than that, I mean, other than the fact that I know after about 15 or 20 years, I'm probably going to have to pull this plant out. This is a plant it and forget it kind of plant. Just a perfect low. You can keep it 2 feet tall and 3 feet wide. It can creep up to 4 feet. I've seen these in where they've never been pruned, that they creeped up to 5 feet. But that was over a 20-year period of time in the middle of a road somewhere. Easy plant to keep in that perfect little ball shape. Super, super drought tolerant. Down here's another one. There'll be several Abelia in this video, some green and some variegated, but this is Rose Creek Abelia. What makes Rose Creek interesting is, number one, it's a dwarf, so it stays small and compact. It's just as drought tolerant and disease resistant and all those kinds of things as any other Abelia. Gets the flowers on it that the bees are attracted to all summer. And then where the flowers were on Rose Creek, the calyx becomes reddish over time, and it actually looks like it's a second round of flowering on this plant. These have been pruned a few times. They haven't been allowed to flower during the season. They're trying to make them perfect for retail sale. But the ones that are blooming here, it looks like you have a white flower that's in the middle of some red flowers, but that's just where the calyx is, behind where the flower falls out. So interesting plant for really year-round interest and super compact habit. So we saw Radiance and Miss Lemon Abelia. Those are two variegated ones at the house that stay small. Third variegated one here is Kaleidoscope. And Kaleidoscope, again, when we're talking about Abelia and these dwarf Abelia or regular Abelia, they're drought tolerant, low maintenance, easy plants. They'll take dry shade, although, you know, they'll go into absolute full sun as well. Kaleidoscope turns an orangey kind of color in the wintertime that I'm not particularly drawn to, but this is one of the best selling plants in the nursery trade, hands down, period. I prefer Miss Lemon or Radiance just because they hold their color a bit better during the wintertime. Beside me here is one of the biggest selling plants I had when I was in the nursery business. This is Frostproof Gardenia. Frostproof Gardenia is a super compact, dome-shaped gardenia that maybe you can keep between 3 and 4 feet in height and 3 and 4 feet in width easily. Heavily blooming. It has a double flower, which a lot of people are more drawn to on gardenias, although some of the single flowering ones actually flower more. But again, this one has the more traditional double flower. Dark green, compact habit, really easy plant. And again, you can, after this thing blooms in the spring, you can cut it down and keep it 2.5 feet by 2.5 feet, or 3 feet by 3 feet, 4 feet by whatever. It's just a perfect little round dome. Here's a young crop of autumn fire Encore azaleas. If you'll go on the Encore Azalea website, you can pick plants by color, by size, and by even bloom type, whether they're variegated flowers or not. Autumn fire is a great dwarf variety, and so you can just pick from the dwarfs. There's 33 different Encore azaleas, but if you're looking for one that's low and compact, pick from the dwarfs on the website. Here's a compact plant for the shade. This is Soft Caress Mahonia, great little fine textured evergreen shrub. Gets yellow flowers in the wintertime that the pollinators are attracted to. Just a great little low compact plant. And I find this plant matches almost everything because it's got that contrasting foliage, slightly different coloration, and again, it blooms in the wintertime. How can you miss with that? I showed the Encore azaleas over there, which are available in dwarf sizes. They tend to lean a little bit more toward the sun. They need about 6 hours of direct sun or more. If you got a shadier space than that and you want an azalea, Gumpo azaleas are fantastic. They're white or pink. They're just going to be spring blooming only, but this incredible compact habit that they have make them really just kind of super low maintenance, small doming plants. They'll get wide, slightly wider than tall, maybe 2 feet in height, 3 feet in width, something like that. This one could almost be considered a ground cover. This prostrate cephalotaxis shows up in so many shade gardens that we cover on this channel. It's just a great, great plant. It can be kept whatever width you want to keep it. It'll get wider in time. And again, it's almost a ground cover, but it can be kept as just a low little ornamental shrub that's almost no maintenance really, other than occasionally, reining it the width back in, which it grows so slowly that, that will only be a once a year project. So this one is probably my favorite of the plants that are going to be in this video. And they just look great back here in this part shade condition. This is Mojo pittosporum. There are variegated pittosporum that can get, I've seen as high as 20, 25 feet, and the green pittosporum, same thing. But then there are these little dwarfs. This one's called Mojo, and it's a variegated version, as you can see. Just contrasts beautifully with almost anything. Perfect in this little light shade condition. It brightens up a kind of a darker spot under some other things back here in the landscape. And then I've got a green version of this called Wheeler's Dwarf, and both of them you can see in the growth habit are definitely much wider than tall. These haven't been pruned at all since they went in the ground. They've been in the ground maybe 18 to 24 months at this point, and they're just easy, low maintenance plants. I talked about the soft caress Mahonia back at Pender Nursery, right here in the middle of the video, and you can see this is one that's been in the ground for 18 months or so, and you can see the height and the basic shape of it, and it's just great narrow foliage, which just contrasts well with almost anything you put it with, again in part shade conditions to shade conditions. One thing to take from this video is that a lot of the plants I'm showing you these are dwarfs of other plants, and so you could definitely buy the wrong one. Like I told you on the pittosporum can get 25 feet tall unless you buy the dwarf pittosporum. It's the same thing with this Viburnum obavatum. This is Ralston's hardy Viburnum. I have a video for this on the channel. This one's a low compact one that can be kept just like what you're looking at now, where it's 2 feet tall and 3 or 4 feet wide, or it can be allowed to creep up a bit bigger than that. This one will bloom heavily and blooms often. It's one of the longest blooming evergreen shrubs, but the regular native Viburnum obavatum is a small tree almost. So it's Ralston's hardy is a great compact version. I showed Autumn Fire Encore Azalea over at Pender Nursery. My actual favorite super compact Encore Azalea is Autumn Lilac. Autumn Lilac has you can describe it as a lavender color flower, or I think at times I'd call it purple or even pink. Really super interesting, kind of large flowers on a small plant, and of course it blooms multiple times a year. Here we are at the beginning of September, and it's setting buds. It'll be blooming in October. Another one of those plants that has gotten smaller and smaller and smaller in my time in this business is definitely Loropetalum. Old varieties of Loropetalum will just, if you don't plant them in the right place, they will just drive you nuts. I mean, there were really screening plants that people decided to put on foundations, and they have to prune a lot. They've been shrinking and shrinking and shrinking, and currently I think Purple Daydream right here is the best of the dwarf Loropetalum. I've seen these more. This one's been in the ground probably 2 years at this point, or coming up on 2 years if it hasn't been 2 years. We saw some recently that had been in the ground for about 3, and they're just perfect little 3 foot tall purple foliage. I've got this one where the shade is hitting it from a little earlier, and so it's losing a bit of the color, but it still looks great in what I would call part shade. If it was in the full sun, it would be solid purple all the way through, but I think Purple Daydream right now is the best. And then I've got one called Emerald Snow, which is a green foliage variety with white flowers, also ultra compact and super, super easy to keep anywhere between 2.5 feet in height and maybe 4 feet in height. With a few more to mention in this video, let me know down below what's your kind of go-to evergreen, low maintenance plant, that somebody can keep below, on a low foundation or below windows. What's your kind of go-to? Obviously I can't cover them all in a video. These are ones I have in my garden, and ones that happen to be looking good over at Pender Nursery the other day. I definitely have to mention Nandinas, the dwarf Nandinas specifically. We have Firepower, which turns bright red in the wintertime, so this is what it's going to look like during the summer. This actually is a variegated version of it that we have here. The new growth earlier in the season is all variegated like this, or it actually comes out this color, then it becomes variegated like that. Also turns red in the wintertime. 2 others that I would definitely mention for great compact plants are Obsession and also Lemon Lime. Obsession has really great red new growth on it throughout the season, and then Lemon Lime is what it sounds like. It's kind of a chartreuse color. All 4 of the ones that I just mentioned are seed-free, and so they're not invasive like many of the other older varieties of Nandinas. The only holly I've mentioned in this video so far is Carissa. Carissa is a broadleaf holly. It's a Chinese holly that's has the broader foliage and does have the point on the end of the leaf, and that one, Carissa stays as that perfect little round ball. Then there's the Japanese hollies, of which there are a lot of dwarf ones. Hugendorn is one, and this one is called Touch of Gold, and this is a gold version of Hugendorn holly. But I really have always been drawn to Hugendorn, grew a lot of them, sold a lot of them at my nursery. What tends to be more in the trade that you'll see is Soft Touch and Hellerai. And I've always considered both of those a little bit wimpy in the landscape. You have to be careful not to, if you go long periods of time without water or rain, to make sure that your Soft Touch don't dry out. I mean, I've seen a lot of dead Soft Touch hollies. They sell like crazy because they're perfect little round balls in the containers, but I do think Hugendorn overall is a hardier plant. So you can get the regular green Hugendorn, or the this is the gold version of it. And then I have to mention another native that make sure you get the Dwarf Yaupon holly. But Dwarf Yaupon is one of the probably kings of low compact plants. It can creep up, and let me just say that almost everything I've shown you in this video, the tags are going to say 2 to 3 feet in height, maybe 3 to 4 feet in height, but none of these plants have some sort of magic off switch. So if you let them grow over a long period of time and never prune them, they're going to go through the specs that are on the tag. Consider the tag more maintainable at, and it's much easier to think of it that way. You can keep it between 2 and 3 feet in height. Dwarf Yaupon hollies I've seen as tall as 6 feet if they're 20 or 30 years old and they've never been pruned, but it's a really easy one to keep very, very small. And then again, there's the regular native Yaupons that are basically small, almost small trees if allowed to grow that way. But Dwarf Yaupon's probably at the top of the list of most industrial, pretty much deer proof, and most drought tolerant of the low growing evergreen hollies. But so there you go. There's some compact options for you to shrubs that stay evergreen that you can use on your foundation plantings. And again, tell me what's your favorite.